I was sitting at my own engagement dinner when his sister lifted her champagne glass, smiled like she owned the room, and said, "Let's not get too attached. She's probably temporary anyway." And just like that, the entire table went quiet for half a second before a few people laughed like it was a harmless joke, like I wasn't the woman about to marry into their family, like I wasn't even worth defending. And the worst part wasn't her words. It was Daniel sitting right beside me, staring down at his plate, saying nothing, not a single word to stop it, not even a glance in my direction. And in that moment, something inside my chest didn't just hurt. It snapped, but I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't even react the way they expected me to, because I smiled. And if you've ever been in a moment where someone tried to shrink you in front of a room full of people, then you know exactly how that feels. So if this story truly resonates with you, only if it speaks to your heart, take a second to like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from, your city, your country, and what time it is for you right now, because I want to know who's here with me in this moment. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old, and that night, my engagement dinner, was the night everything in my life, my relationship, and my understanding of the people I trusted, completely changed. But to understand why I smiled when she called me temporary, you have to go back 2 weeks earlier, to the moment I realized this wasn't just a cruel comment. It was a warning I was never supposed to hear. 2 weeks before that dinner, I was standing in the hallway outside Daniel's home office, holding a stack of seating charts and menu options, debating whether to go in and ask him which wine pairing he preferred, when I heard his voice on the phone, low, casual, almost amused, and I would have walked away if I had not heard my own name. "Emily is easy," he said, and I froze, my hand tightening around the papers, my heart doing that strange thing where it slows down instead of speeding up, like it already knew something was wrong. "She trusts me. She thinks this whole thing is about us building a future," he continued, and there was a pause, then a second voice. "Olivia, unmistakable, sharp, and confident. Good. Keep it that way until everything is signed. Then we deal with her." And I remember blinking once, twice, like my brain was trying to correct what I was hearing, like maybe I misunderstood, maybe this was about something else. But then he laughed, a quiet, almost dismissive laugh I had never heard before. "Relax, she will not see it coming. She never does." And something inside me went completely still, not shattered, not broken, just still. Like every instinct I had was suddenly awake at the same time. I did not walk in. I did not make a sound. I just stood there in the hallway of the house I thought would soon be mine, listening to the man I was about to marry talk about me like I was a step in a plan, not a partner, not a person, a step. And Olivia's voice came again, softer this time, but colder. "You just need to make sure she covers the venue and deposits. We will reimburse later, once everything is under control." And that was the moment it clicked. The engagement dinner, the venue, the sudden insistence that I handle the payments because it would be easier with my schedule, the way Daniel had brushed off my questions about contracts, about ownership, about whose name things were under. It all lined up so cleanly, it almost felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life from a distance. And I remember looking down at the papers in my hand, the elegant font of our names printed at the top, Emily Carter and Daniel Brooks, and realizing that only one of those names actually meant anything in that moment. I quietly stepped back, careful not to let the floorboards creak, and walked out of the house without finishing what I came to do. The air outside felt different, colder, sharper, like it was cutting through whatever version of me had still believed in that relationship. I got into my car, sat there for a full minute, and then I did the one thing they never expected me to do. I stopped reacting emotionally and started thinking strategically. I opened my laptop right there in the driveway, pulled up every contract, every receipt, every agreement tied to that dinner, and I read every single line, slowly, carefully, and that is when I saw it. My name. Only my name. On the venue contract, on the deposit confirmation, on the cancellation clause. I was not just paying for the night. I controlled it, completely, legally, and they had handed that control to me without even realizing it, because they thought I was too trusting to notice, too invested to question it, too naive to read the fine print. And I remember sitting there, the screen glowing in the dim light, and feeling something shift inside me. Not pain, not anger, something colder, clearer. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my seat, and for the first time since I met Daniel, I allowed myself to see him exactly as he was, not the man who brought me coffee in the morning, not the man who talked about future plans and vacations, but the man who could sit in a room and calmly plan how to use me. And I realized something else in that moment, something that made everything that happened later make sense. They thought they were setting me up, but they had already given me everything I needed to take control. And from that second on, every smile, every agreement, every step I took toward that dinner was no longer about love. It was about timing, and I was going to wait until the exact right moment to make sure they understood exactly who they had underestimated. I did not confront him that night or the next day or even the day after that because I knew something they did not. Emotions make you predictable, and I was done being predictable, so instead I played my role perfectly. I smiled when Daniel talked about the guest list. I nodded when Olivia made passive comments about how their family usually handled events like this. I let them believe I was exactly who they thought I was, trusting, accommodating, temporary, and every time I heard that word echo in my head, I did not feel smaller. I felt sharper, because now I knew exactly what they were planning, and more importantly, I knew exactly how to let them walk straight into it. Over the next 2 weeks, I became someone else. Not on the outside, but inside. I started paying attention to everything, the way Daniel avoided details about finances, the way Olivia inserted herself into decisions that had nothing to do with her, the subtle looks they exchanged when they thought I was not paying attention. It was all there. And the more I watched, the clearer the picture became. This was never about welcoming me into the family. It was about positioning me long enough to extract what they needed and then push me out cleanly. And once I accepted that, something strange happened. I stopped feeling hurt and started feeling in control, because while they were busy underestimating me, I was quietly restructuring everything. I called the venue the next morning, confirmed every clause in the contract, asked detailed questions about cancellation timing, refund policies, authority over the event, and when the manager asked if everything was okay, I smiled and said, "I just like to understand what I am signing." And by the end of that call, I knew exactly how much power I had, complete control over the event, including the ability to shut it down at any moment without requiring approval from anyone else, not Daniel, not his family, no one. And that knowledge settled into me like a quiet certainty. I was no longer reacting to their plan. I was building my own. I also made sure to handle every payment personally, every invoice, every deposit, every final confirmation, all under my name, exactly the way they had suggested, exactly the way they thought would make things easier for them later, and I let them believe they were winning, that everything was going according to their design. Olivia even joked one afternoon while we were reviewing table arrangements, "You are really putting your heart into this. It is sweet." And I remember looking at her, holding her gaze just a second longer than usual, and saying, "I always finish what I start." And she smiled back, completely unaware of what that actually meant. Daniel, on the other hand, started acting almost relieved as the day got closer, like he thought the hardest part was over, like he had successfully kept me in the dark. And watching him like that, so confident, so comfortable, it only reinforced what I had already decided. I was not going to expose them privately. I was not going to argue or beg for explanations. I was going to let them reveal themselves in the exact environment they had chosen, surrounded by their family, their expectations, their assumptions, because that was the only way they would truly understand the mistake they made. And by the time the night of the dinner arrived, everything was set, every detail aligned, every piece exactly where it needed to be. They thought they were hosting a celebration, a step forward, a moment where they held the advantage. But I knew the truth. It was not their night. It never was. It was mine, and I was about to decide exactly how it ended. By the time I walked into the venue that night, everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to. Soft amber lighting reflecting off polished glass, white roses arranged perfectly at the center of every table, a string quartet playing near the back wall, the kind of setting that made people lower their voices and smile like they were part of something elegant, something important. And as I stepped inside, I felt every eye turn toward me, Daniel's mother giving me that measured smile she had perfected over the years, Olivia already seated with a glass of champagne in her hand, watching me like she was waiting for something, and Daniel walked over, kissed my cheek, and said, "You look beautiful," Like nothing had ever been wrong, like the version of him I heard on that phone call did not exist. And I smiled back, because at this point, I understood something he did not. This was not about appearances anymore. It was about timing. Dinner moved forward exactly as planned. Appetizers were served, conversations flowed, laughter filled the room. And if someone had walked in halfway through, they would have thought this was a perfect evening, a celebration of two families coming together. But I noticed everything beneath the surface, the way Olivia kept steering conversations, the way Daniel avoided any mention of finances or future plans, the way his father nodded along without really engaging, like this was all just another step in a process they had already accepted. And I sat there, listening, smiling, playing my part down to the smallest detail, until the moment came that I knew was inevitable. Olivia stood up, tapped her glass lightly with a fork, the sound cutting clean through the room, and conversations faded as people turned toward her. She smiled, confident, controlled, exactly the way she always did when she thought she had the upper hand. "I just want to say," she began, her voice warm but sharp underneath, "it has been interesting watching this whole thing come together." A few people chuckled politely, and she glanced at Daniel before looking directly at me. "But let us be honest, not everything that looks permanent actually is." Another pause, another small ripple of laughter, and then she delivered it, smooth, effortless. "Sometimes people are just temporary." And there it was, laid out in front of everyone, not loud, not aggressive, but clear enough that no one could pretend they did not understand what she meant. I heard a few awkward laughs, saw a couple of guests shift uncomfortably in their seats, and I turned slightly toward Daniel, waiting, giving him one last chance to say something, anything, to shut it down, to prove that I had been wrong about him. But he did not. He just sat there, silent, his eyes flickering between me and Olivia like he did not know where to land. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. I felt the weight of the moment settle around me, the expectation that I would react, that I would defend myself, that I would either shrink or explode. But instead, I smiled, slow, calm, deliberate, and I set my glass down on the table with a quiet, steady motion. Then I stood up, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to draw attention without forcing it, and I looked at Olivia first, then at Daniel, then around the room at every person who had just witnessed that moment. And in that silence, I spoke, my voice even, controlled. "You are right," I said. And I saw the brief flicker of confusion cross her face, because that was not the response she expected. "Some things are temporary," I continued, letting the words settle just long enough. And then I turned slightly toward the back of the room, catching the manager's eye, the same manager I had spoken to days earlier, the one who knew exactly what I was about to do. And I gave a small nod, nothing dramatic, nothing that would make sense to anyone else in that moment, but it was enough. And within seconds, the music stopped. The soft background hum of conversation dropped into an uneasy silence, and the first signs of confusion began to ripple through the room. Guests glancing at each other, staff pausing mid-step, and I remained standing there, calm, steady, watching as the night they thought they controlled started to shift in a direction they had never anticipated. For a second, no one moved, like the entire room was trying to understand what just happened. The sudden silence stretching just a little too long, and then the manager stepped forward, professional but firm, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to need to pause service for a moment." And that was when the confusion turned into tension. People started looking around, whispering, checking their phones, trying to figure out if this was a mistake or some kind of delay. But I stayed exactly where I was, calm, steady, watching it unfold piece by piece. Olivia's smile faltered first, just a fraction, but enough. She looked around like she was waiting for someone to correct it, to fix it, to restore the control she thought she had. "What is this?" she asked, her tone sharper now, no longer playful, and I met her eyes still smiling. "Just a small adjustment," I said. And Daniel stood up beside me, his voice low, tense. "Emily, what are you doing?" And I turned to him slowly, giving him the same calm expression I had practiced for days. "Finishing what I started," I replied. And that was when the staff began moving with purpose. Not rushed, not chaotic, but deliberate. Plates were gently cleared, glasses collected, the music did not come back, and the lights shifted slightly brighter, stripping away the soft, flattering glow that had made everything feel like a celebration, and replacing it with something more exposed, more real. Guests were being informed quietly that the event was ending early, that transportation could be arranged, that they would be taken care of, and I could see it now, the realization starting to settle in, not just confusion anymore, but understanding. Slow and uncomfortable, Daniel's mother stood up, her expression tight, controlled. "Emily, this is inappropriate," she said, trying to reclaim authority, trying to pull the moment back into something she could manage, but I shook my head slightly. "No," I said, still calm, still steady. "What is inappropriate is planning to use someone and then pretend it is a celebration," and that was the first real crack. The first moment where the room shifted from uncertainty to awareness. A few people went completely still. Others glanced between Daniel and Olivia, waiting, watching, and Olivia let out a short laugh, sharp and defensive. "You are overreacting," she said quickly, too quickly. "This is ridiculous." But I stepped forward just enough to close the distance between us, not aggressively, not confrontational, just enough to make sure she could not ignore me. "Am I?" I asked quietly. And I saw it then. The flicker in her eyes. Not confidence, not control, but something closer to doubt. Because now she was starting to realize that I knew more than I was supposed to. Daniel reached for my arm, not forceful, but urgent. "Emily, let us talk about this privately," he said, his voice tight, and I looked down at his hand for a moment, before gently stepping back, breaking the contact. "There is nothing private about this," I replied, and the manager approached again, respectful but clear. "Miss Carter, we are ready when you are," and I nodded, because this was the moment, the one I had been building toward, the one they never saw coming. I turned back to the room, to the guests who were now fully paying attention, to the family who thought they controlled the narrative, and I spoke clearly, evenly. This entire event, every detail, every payment, every contract, it is all under my name. I let that sit for a second, watching the realization spread, which means I also have the authority to end it. And there it was, the full weight of it. Not just a disruption, not just a reaction, but a complete shift in power. Olivia's face went pale. Daniel's expression tightened, his confidence gone, replaced with something far less certain. And around us, people were no longer confused. They understood exactly what was happening, and more importantly, who was actually in control of this night. The room emptied slowly that night, not with laughter or celebration, but with quiet footsteps and lowered voices, the kind people use when they know they have just witnessed something they were not meant to see. And I remember standing there for a moment after everyone was gone, the soft hum of the lights above me, the scent of flowers still hanging in the air, and realizing that for the first time in weeks, maybe even months, I could finally breathe without feeling like I was holding something in, and I walked out of that venue alone. No ring on my finger, no hand to hold, no promises left to believe in, but I did not feel empty. I felt clear, like something that had been weighing on me had finally been set down, and the days that followed were quieter than I expected. No dramatic confrontations, no long explanations, just distance, silence, and space. And in that space, I started to see things differently. I started to understand that what hurt the most was not just what they planned, it was how easily I had ignored the signs, the small moments where something felt off, but I chose comfort over truth, and that is something I carry with me now, not as regret, but as awareness, because your intuition does not shout, it whispers, and if you ignore it long enough, it eventually stops trying. So now I listen, even when it is inconvenient, even when it forces me to face things I would rather avoid. And I also learned something else, something I wish more people talked about. Protecting yourself is not just emotional, it is practical. It is knowing what you are signing, understanding where your money is going, making sure your name is where it needs to be, because trust does not mean handing over control. It means choosing wisely where to place it. And if you are listening to this right now and something in your life feels uncertain, if there is a situation where you keep telling yourself it will get better, I want you to pause and ask yourself one honest question. Is it getting better, or are you just getting used to it? Because those are two very different things, and you deserve more than just getting used to being disrespected, overlooked, or treated like you are replaceable. You are not temporary, not in your own life, not in your own story, and the moment you truly understand that, everything begins to shift, not all at once, not perfectly, but enough for you to start choosing yourself again. And I know it is not always easy. Sometimes it feels like walking away means losing everything, but sometimes it is the only way to finally keep what matters: your peace, your clarity, your sense of self. And I believe, in a quiet way, that the universe has a way of removing people who were never meant to stay, even when it hurts, even when it feels unfair. There is a kind of protection in that, a redirection you only understand later. And today, my life is not perfect, but it is mine, my decisions, my boundaries, my future, and that is something I will never trade again. So wherever you are listening from, whatever time it is for you, thank you for being here with me, for sharing this moment, for allowing this story to reach you, because maybe you needed it, or maybe I did. But either way, you are not alone in this, and if this story resonated with you, you can share your thoughts in your story, or simply where you are in the world right now, and stay connected for more stories like this. My name is Emily Carter. I am 29 years old, and the lesson I want to leave with you is this: never let anyone else decide your value when you are the one who holds the power to define it.